Hey everybody, it's Robert here with the Hustle Nation. I hope you had a wonderful day. It's been exhausting, been a long day. Had 2 dump trailers, had to drop today, so it was definitely profitable, and we got to have one on location before 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. And then we got Buford the cat right here. He's making a cameo appearance, saying hello. I did something yesterday, and I went and had a conversation with a friend of mine that is black, and I asked him 5 questions that were all racially oriented. Why? I'll get to that. As you can see, I'm not black. I didn't grow up poor. I didn't grow up with racism in my house to a certain degree. Most of my interactions on a daily basis will probably be less than 10% that occur with blacks. It's not by choice. It's not something that I seek to happen like that. It just happens to be. And we as people are also tribal. We congregate to ourselves, okay? And one of the things he and I actually spoke about was that, if you put 1,000 people on a football field and let them start mingling, eventually there's going to be a separation. And on one side you'll have whites, one side you're going to have blacks, and then in the middle is where you're going to have integration that's going to be occurring, okay? And I think as time goes on, the integration is occurring more and more, all right? And what spawned all of this to occur is a friend of mine asked me to be on a podcast that talked about racism. And I heard his opinion on a few things, and so I wanted to talk with basically another black person and ask them. And so I'll go over those questions that I asked and try to remember them as best as possible. The first one that I asked was, how does slavery affect you personally? Basically, his response was, Robert, it doesn't. There's a lot of people that want to jump on that bandwagon, and, I don't make excuses. You know me, I'm like you. I'm a survivor. Whatever it takes, I'm going to make that happen, and I'm going to get out there and I'm going to do it. You got to understand, this guy's a hustler from the word go. Okay, he's an entrepreneur. He's got his own business, doing very successful. So this is the kind of person that he is, okay? He did say that, and I'm assuming from the things that he said, that at one time he was racist. And he does have family members that have told him, said, you can't trust white people. Don't. And I asked him, again, about the question having to do with slavery, and he said, I don't pay it any mind. He said, I will say this, that if they happen to send me money for reparation, I'm not going to turn it down. I'll take that check and invest it or start a business with it. And he went on to elaborate that, when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, all of the blacks were supposed to get 40 acres and a mule, and that never happened. And of course, as history tells you, and ask any Indian, the federal government has broken virtually every treaty that it's ever made with people on this soil. So, and that kind of opened my eyes. I understand where people are coming from these days when they talk about that sort of thing. So that enlightened me. I also asked him about affirmative action. He said, I think it's wrong. I think that the very best person, the very best candidate for the job is who should get the job. Whether he's black, white, straight, gay, male, or female, the very best candidate should get the job. I understand, okay? I asked him if he thought that the federal government had basically changed positions in the sense that once the slaves were freed, they were basically told, leave, go somewhere, and they really had no place to go, okay? They just kind of started walking. A lot of them got taken advantage of, because if you belong to somebody and somebody tried to mess with you, hurt you, steal from you, the plantation owner, the slave master, took care of that situation, okay? So now these people have nothing, okay? And what they were told they were going to get, they didn't get anyway. And so now they're expected to fend for themselves. And they came from a country where things were totally different. And they were forcefully brought here, you know? And he said, I really don't see that, you know, because my question was, do you see that the federal government took the place of the plantation or the slave master? And, you know, he kind of said, no, I don't. Okay. I asked him also, I said, let me ask you this, man. Slavery was wrong. It was terrible. It did occur. The people that were brought on a boat from Africa to this country, I don't think any of them were lied to and said, you know, hey, we got a gold mine for you. If you'll just come over, get on the boat, you know, we're going to give this to you for free. I think they were put on that boat forcefully. He said, I agree. I said, why aren't blacks the most outspoken people for the right to bear arms? He said, I really don't know. He said, I got guns. Most all of my friends have guns as well. If we have that opportunity, we are armed. He said, but to answer that question, I don't know. I said, you know, I'm just asking, because I would think that, you know, if there was any race, just like the American Indian, you know, that they would be the most vocal about, you know, keeping that right to bear arms. So it was interesting. I'm trying to think, there was one other question that I asked him about, and I just can't seem to remember it. My very last question to him was, what is it that you would want for every white person to know? And he was kind of blown away by that. And his response was, we're not the enemy. We're not your enemy. You know, and I asked him about another question. And, you know, it almost is very sad that that's what their answer would be, but I get it, okay? And also asked a question about what is white privilege? And he said, this is what white privilege is. There was a room full of people, had blacks and whites. And the person asked, how many black people in here would want to be treated like they were white? We're not saying that you change to white, you just get treated like whites. Every black person raised their hand. That person asked and said, for all of you white people, how many of you want to be treated like you were black? Absolutely nobody raised their hand. He said, Robert, that's what white privilege is. He said, you can't help it. You were born that way. You know, it does exist. And for people not to acknowledge that it exists, they're part of the problem. Now you got to understand where this guy comes from. He's very much a conservative, okay, and very big with his faith with God as a Christian, okay? And when it's wrong, he says it's wrong, okay? And he was in law enforcement, all right? And he says, I guarantee the majority of police treat black people differently than they do white people. However, he said, I will say this. Do Black Lives Matter? Absolutely. But they won't matter to you until Black Lives Matter to blacks. And he said, that's part of our problem. He said, it's one of the most sad things that I have to be honest with, but that's the way that I see it. because he said, you know, I've been in situations where I've looked at a cop and I said, hey man, you need to stop that. And as soon as that black person started getting loud and saying, oh yeah, that's right and everything, you know, here we are, I told them to shut up as well because they were acting a fool. So there you have it. My whole intent on having this conversation was with this person is because I'm ignorant. I'm not black. I didn't grow up in a black household, and the majority of people that I interact with on a daily basis are not black, okay? And as he said, we all have our prejudices. Some people like big, tall, small, skinny, steak, vegetables, whatever it is. He said racism is different than prejudices, and I totally agree with that. It was very enlightening, and you know, it was something that I needed to do. I will say this, I'm going to find somebody else that does not come from the same kind of background that he does, and or does not have the same mindset that he does, and I'm going to ask those questions as well and see what those answers are. So I hope you had a wonderful day. It's been phenomenal and productive for me. I appreciate the opportunity to live in this country and to worship God as I choose fit, and he saw enough grace to let me live another day. Hope you have a good evening.